Today's message is entitled In Defense of Santa Claus, in parentheses, and baby Jesus. So, you know, there's a lot of us in this room who maybe our beliefs have changed quite a bit throughout our life. Maybe for some of us, we ended up believing some of the same things that we used to when we were younger, but we believe it in a very different way. That as time goes on, our beliefs can transform and they can evolve. And we're in Christmas, which really is a time of belief. It's a time of magic, a time of wonder. And yet, in our world today, there's kind of this battle that it feels like is going on, because belief has become this very linear, binary thing. It's like you either believe something or you don't. And if you do believe something, then you look at the people who don't, like they're cynical, like they've been sold a lie. And if you don't believe something, you look at people who do, and you look at them like they're naive, and they're also believing a lie. For example, like I take like the flat earth thing. I consider myself a round earther, but it's just like, what is all this arguing? It's just like you either are or you aren't. It's so black and white. And today what I want to talk about is really transcending the either or, those categories that divide us. And I think Christmas is the perfect time to talk about coming together. Christmas is a time of, really, it's a visual experience, because we look around and look at this room. It's beautiful. Thank you to everyone who helped decorate this room last week and during the week. It's a really visual experience because you look around and it's like you see the decorations, you see the lights, and Christmas really turns on for a lot of us with what we see, with the external. I mean, look at our entire cities get transformed. That's one of my favorite parts, is you can go to any major city and it becomes a winter wonderland, and it makes you believe in magic. I mean, apparently there's like a skating rink here in Tucson, which if you need to believe in miracles, then there's, I don't know. Those kind of things, though, it awakens the inner child in me. What are the things that you do around your house or in your life that kind of turn you on to the Christmas season and awaken that sense of belief and that sense of wonder? I know for me, I have this Christmas tradition that I don't talk about a lot, and so I'm being very vulnerable, and I'm going to share it with you today. But I have probably 150 nutcrackers. It's a collection that has accrued in my life. It's like some things start when you're young and your grandparents and your parents are giving you stuff, and then all of a sudden you're like, how did this start? How did I accrue so many nutcrackers? But it's kind of it's like a little bit of a baggage thing, because like, how do you date when you have like 150 nutcrackers? I don't know, like when me and Olivia first started dating, I was like, look, I have something to tell you. I have a lot of nutcrackers. I don't know, like, is this normal? Is this okay? And honestly, it's like something we've had to work through. They're not here in Tucson because I can't bring all my nutcrackers with me. But it's something that I've done, and it's been a part of my life. And anytime the nutcrackers came out, that was when Christmas really began for me. So maybe you have something like that too. But yet Christmas is not just about what's happening on the outside, but there's things shifting for us on the inside. The external aspect of Christmas really, I think, just lets us know about something that's going on inside of us, that we enter into a more childlike place, a more giving place. I mean, yesterday, like, there was just like 15 women just dancing in the middle of this room. That tells me it's like Christmas does something to us. It's amazing. And for those of us who maybe grew up in like the Midwest, I want to remind you, if you live here in Tucson, like, winter is not great everywhere, I spent 6 years in the Northwest, and I thought, oh man, winter's kind of tough. I've not even seen, people have been telling me about -60 winters. So Christmas makes winter this darker time, this time with less light, and for many, this time of really extreme cold and hardship. It really, on the inside, it makes winter bearable. So it does something to us. Christmas changes our reality. I have a cousin who I used to spend every Christmas with. Our families were very close growing up. And over the years, we just stopped spending as many Christmases together. And, as families do, you kind of grow apart, you do separate things. And so now we're older, and I eventually started to see that she was posting on Facebook a lot about Christmas, like more than usual. And I was just like, this is not, we used to spend Christmas together, but this is not like her personality. Like, she was one of those people that would be like 364 sleeps until Christmas. And I was like, no, that just means Christmas was yesterday. That's not a thing, I guess you don't know those people, but that's the kind of person. I think it's awesome, but it was just never her personality. So I asked her, I was like, when did you become this like Christmas obsessed person? And she said, it's actually that Christmas gives me nostalgia for a simpler time, for a time when our families used to spend more time together, for a time when life was simpler, when your parents had everything figured out and you were just got to be the kid. And I was like, sorry, I'm a jerk, I get it. Like, I shouldn't have asked. But I'm glad I asked, because I realized in that moment that Christmas really, it might be this thing we do as a collective, and it might have a lot of external elements, but it's also something that we do on an individual level, and it's deeply, deeply personal. And so I want to use Santa as an illustration for how we can go through this personal journey. When I was a kid, I had this dream, and my dream was that I wanted to capture Santa Claus. And so what I would do was every Christmas Eve, I would use my little computer, and I'd go on to the Santa Claus tracker. And on the Santa Claus tracker, you can basically kind of, like, they do this math for you where it's like, if Santa's in Beijing right now, based on his current speed, in 3 hours, he's gonna be in your hometown. So I would track Santa Claus, and then I would set up this like Home Alone kind of style, like of traps and little pulleys and things. And I thought, I'm gonna stay up and I'm gonna trap him, and I'm gonna use my camcorder, and I'm gonna catch him, and we're gonna talk. And I don't know, the first year I must have fallen asleep too early, which, I mean, that's always the thing, right? And so I didn't catch him. And then the next year I was like, I really want to get him this year. So what do I know about Santa for sure? Well, he always eats our cookies. So I think I'm gonna poison the cookies just a little bit. Not a lot, just like a little bit. And I don't want to hurt him, not really. I just want to talk to him, you know what I mean? But I don't think I was able to get my hands on poison. I don't think we have poison in the house. So that didn't work either. And then the next year, I became a little more concerned with the toys, the gifts that I was going to receive. And the years go by, and then eventually, I'm a teenager, and I'm a Santa Claus denier at a certain point, You probably have these people in your life, they're preteens, and they're like, there's no Santa Claus, And it's a sad place to be in. But it's this movement that we go through with belief in our lives, that we evolve and we change as time goes on. We interact with our beliefs in different ways as time goes on, and this movement has been studied. And it's this movement, there he is, there's Santa. I worded this message very carefully because I wasn't sure if there was going to be any kids in the room today. But luckily we're okay, so I can loosen up a little bit. So our beliefs evolve and they change, and we go through these periods where we believe something and then we don't, and then we come back to it, and it's this really amazing thing that I think we can go through if we really embrace it for what it is. And this French philosopher, Paul Ricoeur, he studied this movement, and he called it the move from pre-critical to critical. See, pre-critical is this point in life where we take everything at face value. Wonder is pretty easy at the pre-critical stage. This is the stage where children are at, where it's like you can just believe in things, fairy tales, wonder. You see Santa at the mall, and it's like, that's him, And it's a beautiful place to be in. And then naturally time goes on and something happens in your life where you're thrust into this stage called the critical stage. And at this stage we challenge the things that we used to believe. We deconstruct. Maybe there's some bitterness at the critical stage. because you feel like, I was told this one thing and now I don't know if I can believe it anymore. And that bitterness might be valid, Maybe we're not just talking about Santa, maybe we're talking about an experience you've gone through with religion and you have been really hurt, and it's okay to have some bitterness. Now, what's interesting is from each other's perspectives, there's a lot of cynicism. See, from the pre-critical, looking at the critical perspective, they just see the critical person and think, well, all you do is you tear things down. Isn't that all you're good for? You just challenge what everyone believes. You can't just let people have their thing. And the critical looks at the pre-critical person and they say, like, how can you actually believe that? And they take it upon themselves and make it their mission to try to convince others of the truth. And if you've been on any kind of journey with faith, with maybe it's Christianity, this might sound a little familiar to you. This movement from a pre-critical understanding of faith to a critical understanding of faith. And the problem isn't going through these stages. Going through these stages is actually important. We all need to go through these stages. The problem is when we stay too long in these stages. So you need each phase. They build upon the last. It's like when you're in elementary school and you're moving from 4th to 5th grade, and you get to 5th grade, and yeah, you're going to learn new things in 5th grade, and maybe you're going to learn things that you already learned in 4th grade in a whole different light. And yet it doesn't mean that you look back and regret having gone through 4th grade and you say, I wish I had never done that. They build upon each other. And so pre-critical provides a foundation for us. And then the critical can be necessary because often the critical is a point in life where we challenge what we once believed and we make room for a bigger understanding. And see, in our world, we're faced with this interesting conundrum because a lot of religion in our world today is still kind of stuck in pre-critical. It doesn't challenge, it doesn't have room to be critiqued. And on the other side of that, there's also this kind of anti-religious mindset, and it's easy to criticize religious thinking. And so when I look around and I look at a community like this, I see a community that is in a post-critical place. See, there's a place beyond pre-critical and critical, and it's called post-critical. And at this phase, you can integrate. You can see the value in each of these stages, and you can understand that as life goes on, you move through these stages, and you come to a greater and greater place of integration. Yeah, you've held something dear, and then maybe you've come to a place where you can critique it, and then you can come back to that original thing, but understand it in a new way, that it's a truth that you once held dear, and now it's a transformed truth. So it's a return to wonder. And yeah, it's not the same as it was when you first believed it, but maybe it's richer because of the life experience you've gone through. Another way that people have talked about this is to transcend and include. You transcend, you move along life stages, your beliefs evolve, and yet you don't just criticize and reject who you once were, but you integrate that into who you're becoming. So there's a couple other ways of labeling this movement, and I want to walk us through them and just name a couple of things and see if you can see yourself in these. So obviously we talked about pre-critical and the move to critical and then post-critical. How about this? First, naivete, disillusionment, second, naivete. Another way to talk about it, enchantment, disenchantment, re-enchantment. How many of us have known feelings in life where you became disenchanted with something? Maybe you even became disenchanted with Christmas. But then you see Christmas through your grandchildren's eyes, and there comes that re-enchantment. Innocence, loss of innocence, reclaiming of innocence. How about this for those of us who have gone through kind of a faith journey? This is language that might be familiar to you. Construction, deconstruction, reconstruction. See, many of us were handed a belief system, a way of looking at things, and that was our construction phase. And then at a certain point in life, we needed to look at it from a different lens. We needed to challenge it. Maybe we needed to deconstruct it. But if you just stay in deconstruction, it's easy to live a life that is bitter and that is angry at the old thing, but there's something new being birthed? What if there's space being made for a reconstruction, a new way of arranging the things you believe? And this last one, I feel like is the most universal. You see it everywhere. You see it in nature, and you see it all over the Jesus story. And that is this: birth, death, and resurrection. So Santa, growing up, he was this, this figure that I cared about one night a year, and I wanted to capture him. And as I've gotten older, when I look into children's eyes and I see the way that they experience Santa, when I look at how throughout the entire world all these cultures have a different take on Santa, and generally it points to generosity and giving, care for the unseen, care for the child, the orphan that doesn't have someone taking care of them, that Santa sees them, or whatever variation of Santa. And from that lens, Santa has become more alive for me now than ever. That Santa is bigger than just someone that I could poison on Christmas Eve. But it's something that's really alive and comes alive during Christmas and comes alive in our hearts. See, we know what Santa means to a lot of people at the pre-critical stage, and then a lot of us have been or seen the critical stage. But can we move to a post-critical understanding of Santa? And really, I set this all up to talk about baby Jesus. See, we know the manger story and the virgin birth and the wise men. And we know this story from the pre-critical phase. And we know the story from the critical phase. But there's another part of the story that isn't often told. And I think that from this lens, we can move into the post-critical stage and have an even larger appreciation for the Jesus story. So, let's see, I'm going to stand up for this. In the time of Jesus' birth, when this story began to be told, the Roman Empire was the most powerful war machine that the world had ever seen. And it was so powerful that the way it worked was that the Roman Empire would come to your town, and they would say, look, you can either join us and become part of our empire, or we will put you and everyone you love to the sword. And in fact, someone would come to your town to proclaim this good news that you're about to be taken over. And this person was known as the Evangelion. And this is a Latin word, it's a Greek word. And this is the word that we have derived the word evangelism or evangelize from. So someone will come to your town and evangelize to you that a great kingdom is at your doorstep, and you can either, say yes or say no. And this kingdom is ruled by an absolute authority, Caesar. And Caesar was the most powerful man in the world at this time in history. In fact, so powerful that many referred to Caesar as the King of Kings, as the Son of God, as the Prince of Peace. And yet his peace came from the sword. Now it's in this world that the Hebrew people had become subjects. They had surrendered to the Roman Empire. And they had been conquered. They had seen their land stolen from them. And they had become taxed so heavily that they could barely survive. And many had been killed. And it's at this dark point in history, this point in history where the light seems to have faded, that this new story begins to be told. That this story of a different kind of king, with a different kind of birth, begins to be told. The story of a king not born in a palace or to royalty, but born in a stable, in a manger, because there wasn't even room at the inn. Not a military conqueror, but a carpenter from a backwater town called Nazareth. And so when people went around and began to evangelize about this story, and the kingdom from this story, and the peace from this story, they weren't talking about a peace that comes from the sword. They were talking about a new way of being in the world. They were talking about a peace that comes by changing how we live and interact with one another, the way that we love each other. That the poor and the meek would inherit the earth. And there was a time when I heard this alternate way of understanding the Jesus story, and I had a hard time reconciling it with the pre-critical and the post-critical and all that. And if you're someone where you really, in this place, there's room for all. There's room for, if the Jesus story and it being literally true is important to you, that's awesome. And if you're like, well, maybe I can take it more on a symbolic, metaphoric level, that's great too. Some things in life, it is good to have some literal truth. I mean, if Olivia was like, hey, did you get the mayonnaise? I can't say like, well, metaphorically I did, And then there are things where truth can exist on multiple levels. And so, for me, I'm less interested in the historic accuracy around Jesus' birth and whether it was on December 25th and all that. What I'm more interested is that in this dark point in history, that a new story arose. Out of the ashes, a new story about what it means to live and love in the world. And a story that really questioned the fundamental nature about where is the divine in all of this? Is the divine on the side of the oppressor or of the oppressed? Now, we here today in our world are in need of a new story too. See, in our current world story, some people can be billionaires while others are struggling to make ends meet. In our current story, some of those billionaires are flying to space while other people here on this planet are struggling to find clean water. And Christmas is a time where we can see the power of a story. That this story has been around for 2,000 years and it's still taking on new meaning. It's still evolving. It's still impacting us, and it changes and it takes on new ways to do so. I'm going to invite Olivia back up, and we're going to go back and sing Have a Merry Little Christmas one more time. But what I want to do is I want to invite you to think about the ways in which the Christmas story can transform still in your life. That when you think about what Christmas is, Santa, Jesus, all these things that have become these symbols around this wonderful time, but there's so much depth to them. We evolve, we change, we grow with them. And so I just want to invite you through this next song just to think about how during this Christmas season, as you're, of course, busy in Christmas shopping and you're going to different parties and, having a good time, can we also just think about how can this story continue to transform us, continue to impact